The market of Zareth Prime never slept. Under the burning red skies, hundreds of alien voices filled the air, mixing with the metallic clang of machines and the distant hum of hovering ships. The air was heavy with smoke, greed, and cruelty. Here, everything had a price. Weapons, memories, even lives. Inside a glass cage no bigger than a cargo crate sat a tiny figure. Her fur shimmered faintly under the neon lights, a mix of gold and white that caught the eye for only a moment before pity took its place. She was small, barely 4 feet tall, her fox-like ears pressed tight against her head, her tail curled around her legs for comfort. Her name was Lyra, though no one knew it, not anymore, to the traders. She was simply pet number 47, a product, not a person. She watched the crowd through the glass, her amber eyes tired, her voice silent. Every time a new buyer stopped to stare, she looked away. She had learned long ago that looking back only invited pain. The last owner who bought her laughed as he made her dance for amusement, then sold her again when she got sick. Now, she was nothing more than another creature waiting for another cruel master. A loud alien with gray scales and yellow eyes shouted across the stall. "Fresh catch, good condition, well-behaved, feeds on simple proteins." The words made the other merchants chuckle. Lyra didn't move. She just clutched the small chain around her neck, a tag with the number 47 glowing faintly. She whispered to herself, her voice almost lost in the noise. "Maybe the stars will forget me soon." The market lights flickered, as if the stars themselves were blinking back tears. Then something unusual happened. A tall figure in a dark coat stopped near her cage. He didn't look like the others, his skin was pale, his eyes sharp and filled with quiet thought. A human, a rare sight in these parts. The merchant smiled wide, showing his fangs. "Ah, Captain, you have good taste. This one's a fine little pet, gentle and obedient." The human didn't reply at first, his gaze fixed on the trembling foxwoman inside the cage. Lyra avoided his eyes, expecting disgust or laughter. But when he finally spoke, his voice was calm, almost tired. "She's not an it." The merchant blinked, confused. "What did you say?" "Captain." The human stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "I said," he repeated slowly, "she's not an it. She's a she." The laughter in the stall died instantly. The other aliens turned to stare, some whispering, some sneering. The merchant forced a smile. Of course. You humans always have strange feelings about lower species. Still, if you want her, the price is—" "I'm not buying," the human interrupted. "I'm taking her." The merchant froze, his voice dropping. "That's not how it works." "Captain," the human reached into his coat, pulling out a small metal badge that gleamed with the seal of the Human Exploration Corps. "This says otherwise," he replied coldly. "By interstellar law, trafficking of sentient life forms is a punishable crime. I'm seizing this one." The merchant's smile vanished, his tone grew nervous. You can't. This is Zareth Prime, not Earth space." The human took one step closer, and the merchant instinctively backed away. "Do you want to argue jurisdiction?" he asked softly. "Or do you want to keep your teeth?" The silence that followed was thick, heavy, dangerous. The merchant hesitated, then pressed a button, unlocking the glass cage with a hiss. Lyra flinched as the door opened, light spilling over her fur. The human extended his hand, palm open. "Come on," he said gently. "You're free now." For a moment, she didn't move. She had heard lies before, sweet words that led only to pain. But something in his voice was different, steady, human, warm. Her small hand trembled as she reached out and touched his fingers. The contact made her chest tighten, a strange feeling she hadn't known in years. When she stepped out of the cage, the crowd stared in disbelief. The human took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from the cold stares and harsh lights. As they walked away, whispers followed them through the market. "Humans and their pity," someone muttered. "She'll be sold again within a cycle," said another. But Lyra barely heard them for the first time. She wasn't behind glass when they reached the edge of the market. She looked up at him and whispered, "What do I call you?" He paused for a moment before replying. "Ronan Vale," he said. "Captain of the Dauntless." Then he looked down at her and smiled faintly. "And you, little one, need a name." She blinked, confused. "Name," he nodded. "Yes, something that belongs to you, not them." He looked at her golden fur shining under the starlight and said softly, "Lyra, that suits you." She repeated it slowly, tasting the word like sunlight. "Lyra." He smiled. "That's right." As the Dauntless lifted from the dark port into the night sky, Lyra sat by the window, watching the stars grow brighter for the first time. She dared to believe that maybe the stars hadn't forgotten her after all. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of hope flickered to life, fragile but real. The Dauntless drifted silently through the dark, its engines glowing a soft blue against the black sea of stars. Inside the ship, the air smelled clean, warm, and alive. A world far from the metal stink of the market where Lyra had lived in fear. She sat on the edge of a narrow bed, her tail wrapped tightly around her legs, her small hands clutching the fabric of the coat Ronan had given her. It still carried the faint scent of metal, coffee and something else, something human. Ronan stood by the door, watching her with quiet eyes. He didn't speak at first, letting her breathe in silence. When he finally did, his voice was calm. "You don't have to be afraid here," he said. "No one will hurt you." She looked up slowly, her golden eyes cautious but curious. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you take me?" Ronan leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Because someone had to," he said simply. Lyra didn't understand. No one had ever done something for her without expecting payment. No one had ever said had to, as if her life had meaning. She looked away again, her ears drooping. "You shouldn't have," she murmured. "Humans get punished for helping my kind," Ronan sighed, the faint hum of the ship filling the pause between them. "I've been punished before," he said. "I can take it." Then he turned and left the room. Leaving her in quiet wonder, hours passed. Lyra explored the small cabin, touching smooth panels and blinking lights. Everything was strange but beautiful. When she pressed a button by accident, soft music filled the air, a human melody, slow and sad. She listened quietly, her fur shimmering under the dim lights. The song spoke of lost worlds and second chances. It made her eyes sting, though she didn't know why later. Ronan returned carrying a tray. He placed it beside her, and the scent made her stomach twist with hunger. "I thought you might like something to eat," he said. She hesitated, staring at the food. "What is it?" "Protein soup," he replied. "Human recipe, no poison." "I promise." He smiled faintly, and for the first time, she saw a softness in him that didn't exist in any other species she'd met. She took a small sip, warmth spreading through her chest. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from a strange relief when she looked up again. Ronan was still standing there, arms crossed, watching her carefully. "You have a name now," he said quietly. "Lyra." Her ears twitched and she whispered, "It feels strange." "It'll feel right soon enough," he replied. "Names have power and no one can take that from you now." That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. The stars outside the window looked closer here, brighter somehow, but she could hear voices from the corridor. Two humans talking softly. "She's a risk," one said. "Command already warned us." "The Alien Trafficking Act forbids this." "She's not cargo," Ronan answered firmly. "She's under my protection. Captain, if they find out—" "We could lose everything," the man insisted. "Then we lose it," Ronan said coldly. "Because if we start ignoring suffering, we don't deserve to call ourselves human." Lyra pressed her ear to the door, her chest tightening. She didn't understand all their words, but she understood the tone. The human was defending her. Even at his own cost, her tail curled tighter as she whispered to herself, "Why?" The next morning, she woke to the sound of metal boots and the flicker of warning lights. Ronan was already in the control room, his face grim. "We've been scanned," he said. "A patrol ship from the Dominion picked up our trail." Lyra froze, fear returning like a storm. "Are they coming for me?" she asked. Ronan nodded slowly. "Probably." The Dauntless's sensors beeped again, and the communication screen flashed red. An alien voice crackled through the speaker, cold and sharp. "This is Dominion Patrol Unit Theta. You are harboring stolen property. Surrender the asset immediately or face destruction." Lyra trembled, her heart pounding. "I'm the asset," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Ronan turned to her, his expression unshaken. "You're not property," he said firmly. "You're a person." He activated the ship's shields, the hum of the engines rising like thunder. "Get to the medbay and stay there," he ordered. "But go," he said, his voice louder now. "I'll handle this." She ran down the hall as the ship shook violently, red lights flashing across the walls. Through a small window, she saw bright streaks of energy cutting through the dark. Ronan's voice echoed through the intercom. "Hold steady, returning fire." Full thrust on the left engines. In the med bay, Lyra hid behind a metal cabinet, hugging her knees. The sound of explosions shook her bones. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent plea to the stars. But amid the chaos, she remembered his words. "You're not property." Something inside her changed, something brave and dangerous. When the firing stopped, the air was thick with smoke. The ship's alarms faded one by one, and Ronan's voice came through again. "Tired but alive. They're gone," he said. "We made it." Lyra stepped into the corridor. Her fur messy, her eyes wide, she found him in the cockpit, wiping blood from a cut on his cheek. Without thinking, she ran to him, grabbing his hand. "Why do you keep saving me?" she whispered. He looked at her with a small, tired smile. "Because someone once saved me," he said softly, "and I never forgot how it felt." For the first time, Lyra smiled too, a small, trembling smile that carried both gratitude and something new. A beginning, but outside the ship, far beyond their sensors, a silent Dominion signal pulsed into the void. It carried a message. Target escaped with human captain. Dispatch hunters. The hunt had only just begun. The stars outside the viewport shimmered like broken glass as the Dauntless limped through deep space. The ship's hull was scarred from the battle, metal plates bent and cracked, yet still holding inside. The corridors flickered with half-dead lights, the hum of damaged engines echoing through the silence. Ronan stood at the control deck, his jaw tight, his uniform streaked with oil and blood. He had saved Lyra once again, but at a price. Fuel was running low and his crew was losing faith. They whispered behind his back now, worried, afraid. Some of them believed Lyra was cursed, that she brought bad luck wherever she went. But Ronan ignored them, his eyes fixed on the stars. He had made his choice, and he would not turn back. In the lower deck, Lyra sat alone near a small window, her tail curled around her legs. She had been quiet since the battle, the guilt heavy on her heart. Every wound on the ship felt like it belonged to her. Every burn, every loss, her fault. Her reflection in the glass looked small and fragile. A creature born to be owned, now sitting on a ship that defied empires. Ronan walked in quietly, holding a small tool in one hand. "You're hiding again," he said softly. His voice tired but kind. Lyra looked down. "I'm not hiding," she whispered. "I'm staying out of the way." He sat beside her, resting the tool on the floor. "You think this is your fault?" he asked. Her ears lowered. "They came for me." "Didn't they?" Ronan nodded slowly. "Yes, but that doesn't mean it's your fault." He leaned back, staring at the dim stars beyond the glass. "You didn't choose this life, someone else did. And I'll be damned if I let them keep choosing for you." Her eyes shimmered with tears. "No one ever said that to me before," she whispered. "Then I'm glad I was the first," he replied. Before either could say more, the intercom crackled to life. "Captain," Rourke's voice came through. "We've got movement on the scanners." Ronan stood immediately. "What kind of movement?" There was a pause, then static. "Unknown." "Wait, multiple signals approaching fast." The alarms blared again. Red lights flashing across the room. Ronan turned to Lyra, his expression sharp. "Stay here." "Lock the door," he ordered. Lyra's tail bristled. "Ronan, do it," he said firmly, then ran toward the bridge. The Dauntless lurched as something struck its shields, the sound like thunder rolling through steel. Outside, small hunter ships darted through the void, sleek, deadly Dominion crafts designed for pursuit. They moved like vultures, closing in from all sides. Ronan's crew scrambled, shouting commands, their fingers flying across controls. Evasive maneuvers. "Shields down to 40%. Main cannon offline." The ship shook violently again, panels bursting with sparks. Ronan gritted his teeth, gripping the railing. "They don't want us destroyed," he said through the chaos. "They want her alive." Rourke looked at him in disbelief. "Then what are we supposed to do?" "Captain," Ronan's eyes hardened. "We fight like humans. We fight to protect what's ours." In the lower deck, Lyra could hear everything. The gunfire, the metal groaning, the screams through the comms. She couldn't stay still anymore. Running through the smoke-filled corridors, she followed the sound of voices until she reached the engineering bay. The crew there shouted at her to leave, but she ignored them. Crawling through a narrow maintenance shaft that only someone her size could fit through, her small hands worked quickly, following the lines of power conduits she'd memorized from watching the humans repair them. She rerouted auxiliary power to the defense grid manually, sending a surge of energy through the outer plating. The next Dominion ship that got too close suddenly exploded in a flash of light. On the bridge, Rourke shouted, "What the hell, defense grid just reactivated." Ronan smiled faintly. "That wasn't luck," he muttered. "That was her." Down below, the heat in the shaft grew unbearable. Lyra's fur singed at the tips, her breath coming in short gasps. But she kept working, refusing to stop. When she finally crawled back out, her body shaking, she saw the lights on the walls glowing steady again. The ship was alive. "Targeting systems online," the weapons officer said. "Then let's show them what humans can do," Ronan growled. The Dauntless fired back, plasma beams cutting through the darkness. One by one, the Dominion hunters fell away, burning trails vanishing into the void. When the final explosion faded, silence returned, broken only by the hiss of the cooling engines. Ronan exhaled slowly, leaning against his chair. "Status?" he asked. "Minimal damage, Captain," Rourke replied. "But we can't keep running like this." Ronan's gaze darkened. "I know." He left the bridge and found Lyra sitting against the wall, her fur dirty, her hands burned, but her eyes bright. "You disobeyed my order," he said quietly. She lowered her head. "I couldn't let them hurt you." He crouched down, lifting her chin gently. "You did good," he whispered. "You saved us." Her tail twitched shyly, and for the first time she saw pride in his eyes. Not pity, not sorrow, just pride. But the moment was short-lived. A soft beep echoed from the communicator on his wrist. Ronan pressed it, and a cold voice filled the air. "Commander Ronan Vale, this is Earth Command." He froze, his heart sinking. "By order of the Galactic Accord, you are to surrender the Orenthal subject immediately. Failure to comply will be considered treason." Lyra's ears flattened. They want to take me," she whispered. Ronan looked at her, his jaw tightening. "No," he said. "They won't." He switched off the communicator and turned toward the stars. "Let them come," he murmured. "They'll learn what mercy costs." Outside, in the endless dark, more signals appeared, bigger this time. Not just Dominion ships, but human ones, too. Enemies and allies now aimed at the same small vessel, the Dauntless, and at the human who dared to give an alien a name. The stars outside looked cold and endless. The Dauntless drifted silently at the edge of a dying nebula, the glow of red and gold clouds painting the hull like fire. Inside the ship, tension hung in the air like a storm ready to break. The crew whispered in corners, fear tightening their faces. Some had fought beside Ronan for years, others were new. But all of them knew what it meant when Earth Command called a captain a traitor. Ronan sat alone in the command room, the light from the console flickering across his face. He stared at the message again and again, the same words burning in his mind. Surrender the Orenthal or face immediate capture. He closed his eyes, the weight of command pressing down on him like iron. He had broken laws, defied orders, and endangered his crew. But when he thought of Lyra, small, kind, brave Lyra, he knew he would do it all again. The door hissed open and she stepped inside quietly. Her golden fur shimmered faintly under the soft light, her hands clutching the edge of his coat. "You're angry," she said softly, her voice trembling. He shook his head. "No," he replied. "Just tired." She moved closer, her tail brushing the floor. "You should give me to them," she whispered. "They'll stop chasing you." He looked up sharply, his eyes dark with emotion. "Don't say that," he said. "You think I saved you just to hand you back?" She blinked, surprised by the sharpness in his tone. "I don't want you hurt because of me," she said. Ronan stood, his height towering over her small frame. "Then listen carefully," he said, his voice steady but fierce. "You're not a burden, Lyra. You're the reason I still believe humanity matters." Her eyes filled with tears, the kind that carried both fear and hope. "Humans are strange," she whispered. "You fight so hard for things you can lose." He smiled faintly. "That's why it means something." Before he could say more, alarms screamed through the ship again. Rourke's voice shouted through the intercom. "Captain, Earth Fleet incoming, 3 cruisers. Heavy class, they've locked onto our coordinates." Ronan grabbed his jacket, his face turning cold as stone. "Prepare for contact," he said. The Dauntless trembled as the massive ships appeared out of warp, blocking out the stars on the main screen. A stern face appeared. Admiral Corrin, a man Ronan once called friend. "Ronan Vale," the Admiral said, his tone sharp. "You've broken interstellar law. You're harboring enemy property. Stand down and surrender." Ronan straightened his shoulders. "She's not property, she's a person." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Don't start with your moral speeches, Captain. You're risking human lives for an alien experiment. She risked hers to save mine, Ronan snapped back. That's more humanity than half the Council shows these days. A pause filled the channel. Cold and tense, then the Admiral sighed. You always were stubborn, he said. Don't make me do this, Ronan replied quietly. You already are. The transmission ended, and within seconds targeting alarms began to shriek. Lyra grabbed Ronan's arm, fear flashing in her eyes. You can't fight them. They're your own kind, she said. He looked at her, his voice low. Sometimes fighting your own kind is the only way to save what's right about them. The crew stood ready, though many looked uncertain. Rourke stepped forward. Captain, with respect. We can't win this fight, Ronan nodded slowly. Then we'll survive it instead. He pointed at the starlit nebula ahead, its swirling clouds of radiation and debris glowing like a storm. If we fly through that, their sensors won't track us, he said. Rourke hesitated. But the ship won't survive the radiation. Ronan looked at Lyra, then back at the stars. Neither will humanity if we surrender mercy. With a deep breath, he gave the order. Full power to engines. Take us in. The Dauntless roared forward, diving into the nebula's heart. Colors exploded outside the windows. Red, blue, and gold lightning twisting through clouds of dust. Inside, systems failed one by one, alarms flashing everywhere. Radiation burned through the hull plating, lights dimmed, and the hum of the reactor turned into a painful whine. Lyra gripped the railing, her fur crackling with static. Her voice broke through the chaos. I can fix the shielding. I know how. Ronan turned to her. No, it's too dangerous. But she was already running, disappearing down the corridor toward the engine core. In the core chamber, heat shimmered like a furnace. Lyra climbed the maintenance ladder, her claws slipping on metal slick with condensation. She reached the central panel, sparks flying around her. Her small fingers moved quickly, reconnecting wires, rerouting power manually. The ship groaned as new energy surged through its veins, Captain. Rourke shouted, Shields are holding again. Ronan smiled for a brief moment, then realized she hadn't come back. Where's Lyra? He demanded, no answer. Only the sound of the reactor humming louder. He ran through the corridors, ignoring the heat and smoke. Until he reached the core, Lyra was still inside, surrounded by arcs of blue light. Her fur glowed faintly, her hands pressed against the main control board. She looked at him through the glass, her lips forming the words. I told you I could fix it. He hit the emergency override, pulling her out just as the system stabilized. The lights across the ship flickered back to life. Outside, the human cruisers lost their lock, their scanners blinded by the nebula storm. The Dauntless vanished into the glowing clouds, safe once more. Hours later, the ship drifted in quiet space, the nebula far behind. Ronan sat beside Lyra in the medbay, her burns covered in glowing bandages. You shouldn't have done that, he said softly. She smiled weakly. You keep saying that, but you never mean it. He chuckled quietly, shaking his head. You're learning too fast, she looked at him, her golden eyes bright even through the pain. You risked everything for me, she said. Now I understand why humans are feared, not because of your weapons, but because you care even when it hurts. Ronan leaned back, his eyes closing briefly. Caring is the only fight worth losing, he murmured. Outside, the stars shimmered once more, the ship carrying 2 lives bound by mercy and defiance. But far away, deep within Dominion space, an order was given. Find the human who protects the pet. The war for compassion had only just begun. The Dauntless drifted quietly through the cold sea of stars, its hull cracked and scorched, yet still alive inside the ship. Silence reigned, the kind of silence that follows storms, heavy with memories and the echo of survival. Ronan stood at the bridge window, his reflection caught between the stars. His eyes fixed on the horizon where human space began again. He knew what waited for them there, judgment, orders, and questions with no right answers. Behind him, the soft sound of footsteps broke the stillness. Lyra entered, her movements slower now but steadier, her bandaged arms glowing faintly in the dim light. Her fur had grown dull from exhaustion, but her golden eyes still held that same quiet fire. You should rest, Ronan said without turning. She smiled softly. I'll rest when you do. He finally looked at her, the corners of his mouth twitching in a faint smile. You've been saying that for days. I learned from the best, she replied gently. For a moment, they both stood in silence, looking out at the endless dark. Lyra's tail flicked slowly, her voice calm but sad. Do you think they'll forgive you? Ronan shook his head. Forgive maybe, forget never. Then why go back, she asked. He turned toward her, his expression soft but unshakable. Because running would prove them right, he said. If we want to change what's broken, we face it, even if they call it treason. She looked down, clutching the small tag that once hung around her neck. The one marked pet number 47. Now it was just a piece of cold metal, meaningless and empty. I used to think I belonged to the ones who bought me, she whispered. But I was wrong. Ronan tilted his head slightly. Who do you belong to now? She looked up, her eyes bright with something new, something fierce. To no one, she said firmly. Not anymore. The words made him smile, quiet and proud. Good, he said. Because that's what freedom should sound like. Hours later, they crossed the border into human territory. Almost immediately, scanners locked onto them, and a deep voice echoed through the comms. Unidentified vessel. This is Earth Command Patrol. You are entering restricted space and state your purpose. Ronan pressed the comm switch, his tone calm. This is Captain Ronan Vale of the Dauntless, returning from Outer Operation Alpha 7, requesting audience with the Galactic Council. The reply came with tension. You've been declared rogue, Captain. Stand down for inspection. Ronan exchanged a look with Lyra, who nodded. It's time, she whispered. Moments later, soldiers boarded the ship, their armor shining, their faces cold. They surrounded Lyra immediately, their weapons drawn. Ronan stepped between them, his voice steady. She's under my protection. The lead officer glared. She's alien property, Captain, not under your authority. Ronan's voice hardened. Then humanity's authority is broken. They were taken into custody. Their ship seized, and by dawn they stood before the Galactic Council. The grand chamber was massive. Marble floors, crystal pillars, and thousands of eyes watching from the shadows. The human representatives looked at Ronan with anger. The alien delegates with curiosity. At the center, the High Counselor spoke. Ronan Vale, you stand accused of defying orders, aiding a foreign species and endangering galactic peace. Do you deny these charges? Ronan stood tall, his voice unwavering. No, he said. I don't deny them. I affirm them. The chamber filled with murmurs. The counselor frowned. Explain yourself. Ronan took a breath, his eyes burning with conviction. I broke your rules because your rules forgot what they were meant to protect, he said. You call her property, but she bled for us. She saved human lives. She proved that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. He turned, looking at Lyra, who stood beside him, trembling but unafraid. When I found her, she was in a cage, he continued. When I freed her, I thought I was saving her life. But I was wrong. She saved mine. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The High Counselor leaned forward. And what do you propose? Captain, Ronan raised his chin. I propose we stop measuring worth by bloodlines and species. I propose that mercy be written into law. A long silence followed. Then unexpectedly, Lyra stepped forward, her small form standing before the galaxy's most powerful beings. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew strong. You call humans dangerous, she said. You're right, they are. But not because they conquer. It's because they care, even when it costs them everything. She lifted her hand, showing the broken tag. I was Pet 47, she said, her voice breaking. But a human gave me a name, Lyra. And when he did, I became someone. The hall fell completely silent. Even the counselor seemed moved, her gaze softening. She finally spoke. Perhaps, she said quietly, this galaxy needs more names and fewer cages. Ronan and Lyra were cleared of their charges, but neither returned to command. Instead, they built something new, on the far side of human space. A colony rose, a place called Haven Reach, where humans and freed aliens lived as equals. Lyra became a teacher there, showing children from 100 worlds how to speak, to build, and most of all, to hope. Ronan stayed close, commanding no fleets now. Only hearts on quiet nights. Lyra would stand beneath the stars, her fur glinting in silver light. She'd whisper softly, I was bought once, but a human gave me more than freedom. He gave me a future. And above, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too remembered the human who dared to care.